So my guest today on the show is not only one of the most badass musical souls I've gotten to run up on in this crazy music of business, but also one of the coolest humans as well. He's a singer, songwriter, and guitarist who cut his teeth in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and is now based in Los Angeles, California. He's been performing on stage since the 1980s, having multiple record deals with various bands as well as his own solo artistry. Over his illustrious career, he's recorded with artists such as Dionne Farris from the band Arrested Development, Nick Jonas and the Administration, and Guy Sebastian. If you like live music, you might have seen him on stage performing with artists such as John Mayer, Dave Matthews, and Santana, Sister Hazel, Than Ezra, and Collective Soul. Folks, my guest on the show today is a man who can make a guitar weep, bark, and speak in tongues all at the same time. A musician who redefines the word smooth, making it ill-fitting for the likes of tabletop, peanut butter, or a baby's bottom. Whose crooning causes angels to weep and even the most heterosexual of men question their sexuality. And a man whose wisdom makes a Tibetan monk sound like a frat boy 5 Jägermeisters in. He's classic like your dad's English leather, fresh like Febreze, and humble like Kanye West in his 7th reincarnation. Please welcome to the show my good friend, Mr. David Ryan Harris.
Man, what an intro. So happy to be here.
Man, thank you.
I mean, I got to say, if I didn't know me, whoever you were just describing, I'm like, I got to hang out with that guy.
Yeah, hell yeah, that's what it's supposed to do, man. We all need that occasionally.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, just to kind of remind yourself of the truth and combat all those things we tell ourselves in the middle of the night before we fall asleep.
That is the truth. Or start the day.
Yeah, either. Yeah, man, how are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I just have a really good sort of headspace about the pace of everything slowing down as they do at the end of the year, and I feel particularly grateful and just I'm always fairly reflective, but especially so for one reason or another this year. So I'm in a really good place.
It's always good having you here in Nashville.
Love it here, man. This is you know, the amount of talent here, and you know, we've spoken about it before. This is I love to tell stories, and this is the place where people, you know, turn stories into songs, and it's like an actual. It can actually be a job. There are a lot of other cities. They ask you what you do, and you say you write songs, and they go, "That's cool, but what do you really do?"
Yeah.
And here, you know, if you can be a songwriter, and it's a noble profession. So I love being here, like amongst my peers and people that I look up to that I would like to actually have be my musical and creative peers. There's not another city like it.
No doubt. Yeah, the story piece is so embedded in the fabric of Nashville. I love it.
Absolutely.
You're moving to Atlanta.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So full circle. It's kind of cool.
Full circle, man. I definitely, when I moved to LA, I said to anyone that knew me, it's like, if you hear me going back to Atlanta, then you know something really bad happened. And I think I had to have that attitude in order to make LA work. If there was any part of me that was like, oh, if it doesn't pan out, then I'll just go home, then I wouldn't have put in the work and tried to do what I needed to do to sustain that move. But at this point in my career, and more this point in my life, I just love the idea of coming home with some scrapes, some scars, but a great deal of knowledge. And if I'm going to plant seeds somewhere, I'd like for them to be close to where, you know, I picked my fruit for the first time.
Yeah. So does it feel like you're coming back to Atlanta coming home, or are you coming back to Atlanta for career opportunities in Atlanta, or is it mostly home?
In terms of career, it's proximity to Nashville. Mm-hmm. I don't really know, you know, certainly the scene that I left in 2000 or whenever, you know, I left 2002, that scene does not exist anymore. And the scene that I really sort of thrived in as a kid in the 80s, that definitely does not exist. But I love that, you know, my kids will be close to their cousins because they live there. And I think children growing up with cousins is a different sort of reality than even having siblings. And I just love I love who my kids are when they're around their cousins. And the proximity to Nashville, I can live in Atlanta and still, you know, work in Nashville 10 days a month, which I think is like the perfect balance for me.
Right. Yeah, 3.5 hours down the road, you can still have the separation from Nashville, which is not a bad thing either.
Sure. I mean, you know, it gives me a chance to be in, like, you know, in LA, I never drive my car. Like, my studio's at my house, but there's something really cleansing about that drive that's, you know, I don't know, 45 minutes or whatever, but having a 4-hour drive that I take 4 times a month to clear my head, to listen to music, to just sort of, you know, reset, I think will be really good for me.
Absolutely. And when you're away from home too, it's just, I don't think we realize, I found this on, you've probably found it on writing retreats and such, which is probably why they get you out of the
Comfort,
city.
yeah.
You don't realize how much bandwidth being in the city where you live is taking, things you have to do. I mean, you don't really realize it till you leave,
right?
And you're on the retreat and you're like, I don't care about anything.
Yeah.
You know, but you're here, you're like, where do I have to go after I get done with my session? What do I got to, you know, I got to go to the post office, got to go pick up groceries, you know, where you just don't, it's kind of nice to be away from that.
For sure. I'm actually not a very good sort of multitasker in terms of other areas of my life when I'm here for a week. Like, I just come here to work. Like, I love it. And if I got to be up till 3 a.m. when I'm here, I'm here to do that. Like, if I were, you know, if I'm in LA and somebody's got baseball practice at 4:30, I'm like, I'm going to baseball practice.
Right.
Because it's right around the corner. But here, it's like, my kid has baseball practice back in LA. I can't do it. I'm here to work.
Right.
So the level of focus for me is, you know, pretty laser sharp. I just have to discipline myself enough to take care of the things that are occurring at home while I'm here.
Yeah, I could imagine that would be hard, and it could cause issues on the homestead if you check out too much.
If you check out too much, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we love having you here. That's for sure. Every time you show up, it's like a cozy little blanket.
Yes, I feel the same.
So the question of how one got his or her start is such a cliche thing, but it's cliche probably because it's such an enigma, and I think especially more so in the music business, just because it's such a weird business and one that's just difficult to get started in. So, notwithstanding the cliche nature of the question, D, tell us how you got your start.
Professional. Well, I'll just start. There was always music in my house. Neither of my parents were singers or musicians, but my mom is like you know, she cut the rug and she loved, you know, Chicago blues, and big fan of like 70s AM radio, everything from Doobie Brothers and Michael McDonald to, you know, Shaka Khan. But she really loved, you know, Muddy Waters and that kind of stuff. And my dad was a huge, he loved jazz, a lot of bebop, a lot of straight ahead stuff, but also it was like super hip. He would also have the new Prince record. Like, he was just loved music. So it was always around. I always, from the time I can remember, singing is the thing that I did to soothe myself. It was me sort of talking to myself in a way, and it's always sort of been a companion to me. So, you know, fast forward through the years, I don't know, 14 or 15 or so, huge Prince fan, and huge, you know, Stevie Wonder was always really, really big. One of the big sort of eureka moments for me was listening to Songs in the Key of Life, and sitting between this. I remember sitting between the speakers of my parents' console, and for whatever reason, it was a double album. I remember pulling it out and just like reading the lyrics, and I just remember what the inside of the jacket smelled like, and you know, I remember all of that, and I remember being like, oh, I'm in this person's world. How cool is that? That he's not here, but this thing takes me on a journey, and that just buried something super deep in me that I never. At the time, I wasn't like, how do I water this thing? How do I grow this? But it was, I can trace it back and like know that was something that was planted in me. So fast forward, I'm a teenager and I want to write songs. I'm into, you know, I just want to express myself for whatever that means to a 16-year-old. No super trauma or drama. I just wanted to write songs and express some part of myself. You know, I was into a lot of stuff from the UK, Cure and Depeche Mode. There's this band called Japan that I really loved, and the singer David Sylvian had this really deep baritone voice, and I loved man, what else was that? The Smiths. Like I was, I would go to our local record store, and if it was from the UK, I wanted it. And I was just like, well, what instrument seems to make the most sense for me to be able to write songs? And I thought about keys, but I was like, well, keyboard players kind of have to stay put, and I don't know that keyboard players get the cool girls.
You were right. I worked very hard at that, being a keyboard player.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like I love the idea that I could like show up with this thing that I play, and whatever. But whatever, it was all in the service of me being able to write songs. This was probably early 80s, 83, 84. And so, it is like Van Halen and a lot of the hair stuff and people that were virtuosos on guitar. And so I was like, well, I could either put in the work and be a guy that does the wheelie thing, or I could be a guy that writes songs. And partially because I was lazy and partially because I just wanted to write songs. I was like, I play guitar well enough to get to the ideas that are in my head. So I started playing guitar, and I was like the only dude in this band that wasn't really a band because we didn't really play shows. It was just a weird whatever. Did that for a bit, and then after I graduated from high school, I met some other dudes that liked freaky music like I did. I lived in an all-black neighborhood, but I went to a white high school, and so it's like if I'm the only guy in my exact neighborhood that liked all this freaky music, the Police and Missing Persons and Japan and Duran Duran, I'd meet somebody and they'd go, oh, you got to meet this other brother that lives in the neighborhood 2 neighborhoods over. He likes that freaky shit too. And so we all just sort of kind of banded together just because we were kind of freaks and misfits, and we just kind of started a band because we were happy to be around people of a like mind. There was no blueprint on how you get a record deal. That wasn't even really in our headspace. We played shows because we liked to play shows, and the girls were cool, and that was a fun thing. But the beginning of it really had nothing to do with having, at least for myself, I didn't have huge aspirations of being a star. I just wanted to play with my friends. So, I mean, I don't know how far down the chronology you want me to go, but it just started, I just sort of fumbled into it. I wanted to be able to write my own songs. I never really, I didn't try to learn how to play Eruption or, close to that. I just was trying to do my own thing.
So you start a band. It's, first of all, I love when I have a buddy on the podcast, because I get to go back and research about a buddy that I already know, which is fun because I always find some cool little shit that I didn't know about. So you start the band called Follow for Now.
Correct.
Signed to Chrysalis.
Again, correct.
And I saw it described as a combo between Motown and thrash metal, which seems to typify the word eclectic, which gets thrown around an awful lot with you.
Yeah.
And first of all, D, is the word eclectic, when described or when used to describe you and your music, is it apropos, or is it really just a bunch of us white folks putting a term to a black dude who plays music outside the box we think black guys grew up playing?
Maybe a little bit of both. I mean, it is, it's a strange stew. It's a different stew. Like I had Run DMC and Funkadelic and Rick James at my neighborhood, but then I went to school and it was like Pink Floyd and, Zeppelin and Van Halen. So it is sort of an eclectic group of things. Not so eclectic that the music fan wouldn't have both of those, wouldn't have all of those things in their record collection.
Right.
But in terms of deciding which thing am I going to do, I was just dumb enough to go, well, why don't I try to do them all? Because I love them all equally.
Right.
And, once you hear someone call what you do eclectic, it sort of has like this, I don't know, you feel like slightly above the people that aren't eclectic. And so then it became this flag that I wanted to wave and be sure that I was not really beholden to, but it just felt okay for me to have a thing that you couldn't define. So I didn't feel like it was dismissive or like, look at you crazy black kids doing it. You know, I didn't,
right. More smart, diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like that. Man, hearing you talk about the UK thing, I can now hear it.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I grew up on too. Just everything coming from the other side of the pond was just cool.
And I love their take on American soul, like Terrence Darby at the time. Like Terrence was from the States, but he couldn't get arrested here.
Yep. He
goes to the UK and he has even you look at the British Invasion or, Clapton's playing. He's playing an American art form, but it has a different take on it, a different excitement about it. So yeah, I was so into that stuff.
The way that Europe and the UK especially found a way to imbue soul into pop rock was really impressive. I mean, even still modern day UK stuff is still done, or even not modern day, but like even, well, I'm thinking of guys like James Morrison when he was working with Egg White and all those guys over there who were kind of playing that UK soul.
Yeah.
Adele, actually, her early records, Chasing Pavements and stuff like that, that was very soul based. A lot of those changes that you're hearing over there, it's
and not only soul based. I think a particular relationship to soul that was ignored in the States. I mean, my flag bearer and standard bearer for a lot of that is I don't know if you know Lewis Taylor. Man, I can't tell you how excited I am that you don't know Lewis Taylor.
Okay.
He's gonna blow your fucking mind. I remember hearing it for the first time. A friend of mine, Chris Dowd, who plays keys in Fishbone, he called me he was in London at the time. He's like, man, I got to play something for you. He's like, I'm going to play it for you over the phone because this is like 97. Like there was no MP3s. And he played the stuff for me just like over the phone. And I was like, my mind was blown. But he's like Marvin Gaye and like Captain Beefheart and like Sly and the Family Stone and just his relationship and knowledge and real love for American soul, which in a lot of ways is an ignored kind of art form for Americans because it's a part of, I think it's in a lot of ways it's tied to some things that have happened in society and we're trying to move past those things so that music is connected to it. So the blues and the soul, it's like, we don't want to talk about that. We're trying to move and do this other new shit. And then, it seemed to me that people in the UK were like, no, this is great. And they knew as much about it as, if not more, than we did. And their take on it was just different because they didn't have the same life experience.
Yeah.
It's like there's some guys that when you hear McCartney do his take on Little Richard, when he does his kind of gravelly voice thing, he can't do Little Richard. So the thing that he does comes out as a new thing.
Right.
Like, he's fortunate that he can't hit the marks that he's trying to hit because it comes out as a new thing.
All right. So, man, what a great point. So growing up as a lover of everything out of the UK and also growing up my parents were in basically a blue-eyed soul band. I lived on a bus the first 6 years of my life and that's all they played. And so I was growing up with Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life was my watershed record. But I've never heard anybody describe the relationship between UK soul or the explanation for that like you just did. But it makes so much sense. I've always seen soul in the United States as bifurcated from the rest of music. It's this clean delineation. And I mean, the hypothesis you give, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe there's shame around it. It's kind of more a cultural thing here, and we kind of toss it off as a cultural thing instead of throwing it in the pot of everything.
Sure.
Whereas it's not loaded like that over there. So they've allowed the amalgamation of it maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about, a lot of blues artists, or even when I was in Follow for Now, we didn't play traditionally black music, but any music that we played, our audience was primarily white. And B.B. King or Buddy Guy or Robert Cray or any of the older, that generation of blues players, their audience is primarily a white audience. And so the way I put it together is my parents were trying to get beyond they don't want to talk about sharecroppers and fields and that sort of blues. They're trying to get to the the Cadillac. You know, they're trying to move in that direction. And I think it's sort of, that's why it's a forgotten sort of art form around amongst young Black people now. It's like, no, we're trying to move to some other thing, and that music is connected towards this, is connected to this sort of subjugated kind of thing, and we're not that anymore. We're not like fucking wearing overalls, and we're not doing that thing. And so we forget, or we throw away the part of the music that is magic and is ours and something
commonality
to own. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That thread in the middle of it that should connect all of it, short of a stigmatizing, shaming kind of feeling of this thing, which kind of prevents us from
embracing it for what it is.
Yeah. Man, that's a great point. I never thought. So Lewis Taylor.
Man, I'm telling you. So I look for people, I say I need people to scare me musically. And he scares the shit out of me. He's since retired. I just read that he's going to start making music again. But his self-titled record, Lewis Taylor, is one of the most musically complex and soulfully satisfying records. It's in my top 10 of all time.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of top 10s, I have a top 20 song list of my favorite songs of all time. One of which you happen to be indelibly involved in.
What is that?
Dionne Farris, I Know. Man, one of the freshest. Hey, and actually speaking of the concept you were just talking about, which is still kind of messing with my mind right now because I've never thought of that. I feel like it really represents. The Dionne Farris song really represents everything we just were talking about. It was so fresh because it wasn't so delineated. This is soul in the U.S., and this is just the stuff that Black folk play.
Right.
And here's rock and pop, and this is the stuff that white folk play. And that, to me, was an amalgamated aesthetic of both that was somehow free from that delineation that we kind of ascribe to so much. I felt like that Dionne Farris song was fresh like that.
I mean, it was definitely a combination of like, I remember the demo and me trying to basically program a funky drummer on a Linn drum thing. And you don't have like the original Stubblefield thing. It has like, 100 levels of velocity in terms of what the snare is doing. Like it's all like beautiful shades of this thing. And you only have 2 velocity levels on the Linn drum. And I just remember like, because that beat was like, that's a badass beat. And especially a badass beat in 94. And so it's like, well, I want to do that, but all I have to do that is this Linn drum. So because I can't get to the thing that I want, I don't have Clyde Stubblefield or a drum machine that does those things. I'm going to do it on this. And so I know in my head that like, that's where those bones are buried. Like this, you may hear it as this new thing. I know like it's just a B-rate Clyde Stubblefield thing. And then you go, well, what other things sort of go on top of that? And I was like, well, I really love, I'm horrible with Zeppelin songs.
Oh, the slide guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. I was like, I was really into that at the time, and I had like this Dan Electro. So I was like, well, what if we add that in,
Did you play that slide?
Yeah. Actually,
so swampy.
And it got me in a lot of trouble.
Did you get hired to
I
play
got hired to play slide.
And you didn't know how to play slide.
And I told these people a bunch of times, I was like, nah, man, that's not really my thing. But just so we don't get off the track of that song, it was just like, these are things these are ingredients in my spice rack. So why wouldn't I put these things together? Like, why do you?
Yeah,
you can only use salt and pepper. Like I got cumin over here. What are you talking about? Like and so there was no agenda other than these are things that I love.
Right.
And I was at that point in my life hadn't had enough success or failures to give a fuck. It's like I just put it. There is no right or wrong because I don't know any better.
Right.
I mean, I would probably. If I had to do it right now, I might make safer and quote unquote safer and different decisions that ultimately wouldn't have the artistic gravitas of that thing at that time.
Right, because was that your first? Because you were coming out of being an artist.
That was my first my own band thing I'd ever done.
Yeah,
writing with and for other people.
So you were probably out of your head in a good way there. Like you were just kind of being an artist.
Well, that's like I met Randy Jackson on that project because he was like the producer for the whole thing, and he was like, "Well, you guys, you know, me and my buddy Milton Davis from Birmingham's like, you guys can produce this thing." So for me, it was like, wait a minute, you're giving me the key to the Porsche? Like we went up to Sony and tracked this. You know, I was like, I couldn't believe that someone was like, "Hey, this thing that you're doing is, you know, really cool, and I'm going to give you the keys to this expensive thing." So I was, you know, thrilled, and like I said, dumb enough to think that my vision could work. I did. There was very little second guessing, and right. I think the longer you go in your musical, or maybe not even your musical career, I think in any sort of creative endeavor, the longer you go, the harder it is to stay connected to the part of you that doesn't give a fuck. Particularly if you don't have massive success, because it's, you know, if you put something out and it doesn't succeed, project number 2, you go, well, what didn't I do the first go around? And so that becomes something on one shoulder. Then if that thing kind of succeeds but not really well, then you get a thing on your other shoulder. It's like, well, maybe you should do this thing. So I think, which is why I love people like Prince or like David Bowie, because they just kept moving.
Right.
You know, they just
right.
didn't look back and kept moving. But, you know, so that record and that time in my life, I look back at creatively like, that kid didn't care in a really good sort of way.
Yeah, you know, I've been talking with a good buddy of mine about some of those concepts about how we limit ourselves with certain an aspiration for success, or for the being focused on the result limits us. And one of the phrases that I'm trying to employ every day now is to be too stupid to know. You know, when you look at the guy, he's too dumb to know.
Yeah.
Man, I've seen a lot of guys that are too dumb to know have some great success because they just don't even know.
And I love to be, I mean, I'm 53. I've been doing this a long time. So when I come across someone that's like talented, but they don't realize how talented they are, and they don't realize those things aren't supposed to go together.
Right.
I love it so much because it's really, really almost impossibly difficult to hold on to that thing. Like the only person that I can think of from an artistic perspective, well, maybe David Bowie. He probably held on to that the whole time. But like, I mean, people are gonna get really mad at me, but like, Stevie had a great period, and that, like, personally, I don't want to hear a new Stevie Wonder record.
Right.
And for what his output was, he's okay. You know, it's really hard to hold on to that like I don't care thing for your whole career, no matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. So it's like you strike while that fire is hot, and it's just it's a small period of time, generally speaking, I think.
Yeah, it's such a challenge to I feel like our mind in music, it's almost like music's not meant to be done with your mind.
Man, if you could put music out and never have to have any relation to how successful it was or hear what other people thought about it ever, but you could just continue to like get paid or whatever, I wonder how long people would make amazing music.
Well, it's scary to think how different the music would be that we're making.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it's probably a good litmus test to say, are you really doing it the way you should be doing it? Is if you didn't have to be successful with this,
yeah,
what would you do tomorrow?
Right.
What song would you write tomorrow? And
I've had a really hard, so my buddy Edwin McCain calls it his give a fuckerator. And he's like, you gotta turn your give a fuckerator off. And it's just hard, to turn that off. I feel like for myself personally, I'm getting to a place where I want to find other places to be financially successful. So the thing that I love, the thing that feeds my soul, the thing that made me start on this journey in the first place can reside in a place that doesn't give a fuck, because that's where it's truly what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And I actually feel, for whatever reason, excited about the prospects of doing that.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? We have somehow established that the way to be successful in the music business is to get paid for doing it, when a lot of times that check you're getting stroked for doing it is the very thing that limits your musicality or limits the authenticity of your voice.
Right.
I mean, at very least, you have to go to war to not let it do that.
100%.
You know?
And only you know what that war is.
Right.
Like you know, you're the only person that truly knows, like, did I go as far as I wanted to go? Or, you know, how much did I compromise on whatever this vision is? So it's a very personal war. Yeah.
You know, I just thought back to one of my biggest mentors in Nashville, one of the first guys I ever met. Two guys, actually. Tony Miracle. Yes, that's his real name.
That's good stuff.
Tony was basically a Swede in an Ohio dude's body. He was like, only listened to stuff from the UK, deep into analog synths. Mm-hmm. I came to Nashville more as a organ player, piano player, Rhodes player, and he got me into analog synths deep.
Yeah.
Erasure, Vince Clarke, Orbital, Depeche Mode, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And got me my first synth, Juno 106. He would force me to make tracks only with the Juno 106, take every other keyboard. Great. Every hi-hat you make, got to come from that. Every piano, every pad you make, got to come from that. You want a kick? Make it on there.
Yeah.
Tony said to me, and he was working on it still to this day, probably the best programmer I've met. And I remember Tony saying to me, man, I just try to get fired off of every gig. Because his shit always sounds so different from everybody else's. Right. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, I just don't care. He goes, I don't really care to do that music and get paid for it. And he would just make records he liked to make. Yeah. And I would always ask him, what record you making right? I'm making my 15 favorite synth pop songs. I'm making it. He's singing them and whatever. He always had a record he was doing.
Right.
Not for money.
Yeah.
And that was why he was like, he was making money over here.
Yeah.
And he said, Jamie, just try to get fired.
Yeah.
And I remember that worked.
You worked creatively, or you got fired?
I got fired a lot. Yeah. Somehow it didn't work for me like it did, but yeah, I got fired.
Yeah.
No, but he said, I guess his point was, which is obvious, just do things that could get that are out of the box, that you don't try to look for things they want. Do things that push the envelope, and then it's going to make them look at that and go, this sounds fresh. It doesn't sound like everybody else.
Sure.
You know?
But I think, like, if you do that thing, and let's say you have a huge financial success, there's a financial windfall with this thing where you were trying to get fired, you then create a lifestyle for yourself that you have to maintain.
Right.
And then you forget that the thing that got you the success, you think it was the music that you made and not the spirit that it came from.
Right.
Or maybe it's half and half. And so that's where the self-doubt comes in. You're like, well, shit, was it that I didn't give a fuck? Or was it literally those actual sounds and that actual chord progression and that whole thing? So it's a very difficult, thing. And I actually don't think there's enough sort of support for artists in that space from people that know what that is.
Right.
And you can have that struggle with no success, but you have any amount of success or sort of runway behind you. I think it's a recipe for a meltdown.
Yeah, I remember this dude saying to me one time. Actually, he said it was a group of us sitting, a group of all creative folks in various fields, and he said, I think all you need to ask yourself, maybe it's only, think of the ways that you've not achieved what you want to achieve yet. He said, is it possible that it's only the grace of God that has prevented you from having that achievement that you want and that you think you need?
Yeah.
Is it possible that is the case?
There was definitely a period in my life where I was like, man, had I been successful when I wanted to be successful, I don't think I would be here to talk about being successful because I was a fucking idiot.
Hey, folks. I want to talk to you a little bit about the sponsor for our podcast, Love Justice International. Love Justice International is an organization very, very dear to my heart. Did you know that 40 million people, as we speak, are living in slavery as a result of human trafficking in our modern day society? Love Justice is an organization that actually attacks that trafficking, and they do it at its most strategic point while it's occurring, but most importantly, before the men, women, and children have been exploited. They're in 19 different countries, and in those 19 different countries, they've worked with authorities to arrest over 950 suspects and have prevented over 24,000 people from being trafficked. This is so very important. So if you get a second, please go to their website, lovejustice.ngo, and for just a couple bucks a month, couple cups of coffee, you can literally stop a girl or a boy from being exploited or enslaved. So once again, take a minute, go to lovejustice.ngo, lovejustice.ngo. Thanks.
So just before we move on to the next thing, we're talking about the slide thing.
Yeah.
Craig Street is one of my favorite producers. Michelle and Deggio Bitter.
Oh my goodness.
Craig made a string of records that I just thought were everything. So I get a call from Craig about playing on this Cassandra Wilson record. They were doing I Can't Stand the Rain. I'm like, hey man, we want you to come play slide on this song. And I was like, hey, I don't play slide. He's like, come on, man. We heard you on the Dionne Farris song. I was like, you don't understand. Like, what I'm doing is really easy. The guitar's in open E, slide to the 12th fret, move around. It's super easy.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, I think you're just being modest. I was like, nah, man, you should get Chris Whitley. That's your guy. He's like, no, we really want you. So like at that point, my knowledge of slide guitar is like, well, I feel like I have to commit to either major or minor. And I was like, send me the arrangement and I'll see if I think it's something I can do. If I think it's something I can do, sure, I'd love to do it. And they sent me the arrangement. I was like, nah, I'm not your guy. You need to call Chris Whitley. And I think at the time, Chris, thank you, rest his soul, his tortured soul, was just not, he was in the throes of his addiction and they were like, he can't do it. Kept asking me. So I was like, all right, fine, fuck it. I guess I'm going to do it. So they fly me to New York to Sear Sound in New York, which there've been some amazing jazz records made in that room. And everybody's cutting live on the floor. It's me and it's bass player Lonnie Plaxico and it's percussionist Jeff Haynes that I know, and Anton Fig is on drums. Oof. Cassandra Wilson is singing live. We're doing all this stuff live on the floor. So we count the song off. I'm fucking fumbling around. And Craig comes on talk back. He's like, hey guys, that was great. Everybody else killed it, right? Everybody else killed it.
Yeah.
He's like, hey guys, that was great. Hey David, listen, don't play in the intro in the first verse. I think it'd be better if we kind of build it. So you like come in at the chorus and then play from there out. Okay, cool. I got it, Craig. Got it. We play another one and like, there's very little baffling. So there's no overdubbing.
Oh, right. So you're not in an ISO booth.
No, we're all in a room.
So you're all up in Anton Fig cymbals.
I'm all in. All the overheads, all the condensers, yeah. And then we play another take. Everybody else is killing, and I know I'm just fumbling around. Once again, hey man, that was great. So David, we were just talking in here. Maybe you should come in on the second verse. Don't come in on the first chorus because that'll also, and then same thing again. Then it's like, hey man, just play in the bridge. And then it's like, hey man, why don't you just come on in? And like, these other people don't know me at all. And they're just kind of like eye rolls like, come on, bro. Like, who is this dude? So I go in the control room and no one has to say anything. I know that I was like terrible. Like I know the first take after I left the studio was probably the one that ended up on the record.
Right.
And I remember putting my little Dan Electro in my little flimsy gig bag and walking back to my hotel. And I was like, I could either be just destroyed and just feel like the smallest person on earth, or I could figure out what the lesson is to learn here. And I was like, the lesson for me is there is no shame in holding fast with like, I'm not your guy. And I was like, from now on, if I tell you I can do something, it's because I know I can do it. I have no problem saying that I can't do something that I can't do. I'm not gonna, I want to push myself. So if there's something I think I can do 80% of, I might say, I'm your guy. But there's no shame in being like, hey man, I'm not your guy. And also, that just makes me be able to lean more into like, if I show up, it's because I know I can do this shit.
Right. So you kind of want to, sometimes you want to fake it till you make it, right? You want to put yourself in situations you're like, I don't think I can do that.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden you're like, damn, I just did that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got a platform for then you just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
But where's the line between that and
it's like, I want to punch I'm not afraid of punching above my weight, but like, I'm not going to do judo with somebody if I'm a boxer.
Sure.
So it's like, I don't do that. It's like, there's no shame in saying I don't do that other thing. Like I'm fine with like, being a little sweaty on the gig and being like, oh, I got to figure this out. But the whole playing slide on that tune was so far outside of my abilities. And as fate would have it, eventually they did a completely different arrangement and they got Chris Whitley to play.
So when you're walking out of that session feeling like a total schmuck, feeling embarrassed, whether you take a lesson from it or not, you're feeling shame, you're feeling tiny. They flew me up here.
Yeah.
You can't even go back to your home. You go into a hotel they rented for you.
Exactly.
So like you're walking, before you took the lesson from it and actually became a responsible, mature human being, did you find a payphone, leave a message for that fucker and say, I told you
so. No, in my brain, I was like, I did tell him. I told him a bunch of times. But before I got to my hotel, I was like, all right, well, this is how I'm going to take this thing. And to this day, like, I'm not a studio musician. Like, I'm pretty methodical in the things that I want. And I know that the distance between what's in my head and what is on my fretboard or I'm able to make happen is longer than I would like for it to be. So my strength isn't in, I'm going to rifle off a bunch of ideas that are going to blow your mind. But when I do settle on something, that'll blow your mind. So it's like, if you send me stuff, I can play on it and I can kind of go around it and find the thing that is great. But just know when you're listening to my record, that was probably not the first thing that I played.
Well, and because you're an artist, and I don't mean just artist as in a singer who performs. I mean, an artist.
Right.
So to me, one of the things I always found difficult about session playing was a lot of times, man, taking nothing away from the cats who can play it one, two times and it's perfect. A lot of times just the nature of that, we got to play it right the first time.
They go to a go-to.
It's a lowest common denominator. And I'm not saying it can't be right on the first time, but one of the things, if I'm producing a record with guys on the floor, the first thing I tell them is, if you're coming up with it on the first time, chances are, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, chances are you're not digging hard enough.
Yeah.
And I want to give you guys the freedom to dig.
Yeah.
I'm cool if we're on past 11 and 12 and you're just now landing on, oh shit, that's the hook for verse 2.
Sure.
So, I mean, I'd say that's more the explanation for you. It's not even about acumen. It's more, what's the perfect artistic
thing
part for this?
For sure.
Not the low hanging fruit.
Right.
I don't want the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I know it's there. It doesn't taste as good. I want the shit up there.
I remember producing a song for Guy Sebastian, a song called "Never Be You," and I had Bob Reynolds playing tenor sax on it, and Bob played like 3 or 4 solos that were all perfectly nice solos. And I was like, Bob, I want you to play something that's going to get you fired.
Yeah, there you go.
Play like you're mad at me and you want to get fired. And the solo that he played, I was like, that's what I needed. And it's like, when you said the whole thing about I play, to get fired, I know what that is. Because the session player's like, there are 4 other dudes on this session right now. I can't fish around for this thing to fuck up a take or to, I don't want to slow the session down because I can't find the right part. So a lot of times, I would imagine, I've never been that guy, but I can imagine you don't fish as much as you probably could or feel like you have the freedom to do as a session player.
Yeah, or tap into that just kind of unbridled emotion. I always tell guys, hey, I know it's hard. You're getting paid and come in here. You guys are good at your craft. You do the same thing every day, and that's how you get good is you do the same thing
every day.
Repetition every day. Try to think about that instrument like you did when you were first picking it up.
Yeah.
When we were playing in the dark. You didn't give a shit, you know? Speaking of that, did I tell you this story about the Manu Katché story about the Peter Gabriel thing? Did we talk about that?
Oh, I feel like we have talked about Manu, but let's tell the story again.
and I'm even scared to do this on tape because God knows how much I've embellished it over the years. But I'm gonna tell it almost in how I remember Manu telling me this story. So I was tracking a record with Manu, and a bunch of us Nashville guys got flown out to track on a record, and they flew Manu in as the drummer.
Right.
And obviously, for those of you out there who, I mean, just Wikipedia Manu, Sting, Peter Gabriel, just an incredible, drum clinician. So we spent the first few days giving Manu a break, not really asking him any questions, and kind of by the end, we were getting comfortable. We would go outside, smoke with him a good bit, and so we started getting more. Hey, tell us, hey, when you were out with Sting, what was it like? You know, I was sitting having a cigarette with Manu out on the front porch in Idaho, outside of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, probably around midnight. We were both on rocking chairs, and I said, "Man, probably top 5 song for me, Impact, was In Your Eyes," and I said, Peter, I mean, so much of that is the beat, the groove. I mean, does Peter know how much he owes you for that? Yeah, for that groove. And I mean, made one of the best songs ever. You know, I still remember being in the shower as a kid, hearing that on the radio, and just going, just dropping. You know? Yeah, not dropping in the shower, but that's for another conversation,
another podcast.
So he said, no. He said, I owe Peter Gabriel everything. I said, really? He said, what do you mean? He said, Peter saw me. He found me in the small jazz club in Paris. And I was just doing my thing, being Manu, and doing my style. And Peter came up and said, I'm Peter Gabriel. He said, yes, I know. I'd like you to play my album. Could you come out? Could we fly out? And Manu's like, of course. Flew out, playing the record. I get there, walk in the studio. The engineer's there. Peter's not there. Puts me on my kit. Get out there, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to play you the tune, and you just kind of start rolling through, okay?" And he's like, "Great." Says they start the song, and I start playing my thing, doing my thing, and get done. And engineer goes, "Maybe try one more time." Do my thing. He said halfway through the tune, Peter Gabriel walked in the control room, and he was listening and kind of just looking pensively. And at the end of the take, engineer says, hold on, Peter's going to come in. Walks in, stands in front of Manu. He goes, hi, Manu, good to see you again. The reason why I asked you to come play on this album is because I've never seen anybody so unbridled, just with such personality on the drums, who just, I felt like you were pouring your heart out on these skins, and just like, that's what I want.
Right.
And I think that's in you. I know it's in you, and I want you to do that for this. So I tell you what, I'm gonna stand in front of you while you play this time, and I'm gonna dance, and I'm gonna dance the way I felt when I wrote this, what I was looking at when I wrote this song, and I'm gonna just do that, and then you just play, man. They turned the lights off, and he said Peter Gabriel just started dancing like a goddamn fool in front of the kit, and he just watched Peter Gabriel the whole time. Yeah, played the take. He got done, and Peter looked at him. He goes, "That's the take. That's what I'm talking about." He said, "That was the take. We didn't punch. We didn't do anything. It was In Your Eyes."
Yeah, that's amazing.
So somehow Peter knew right away. Oh, he said, and that's why I owe Peter Gabriel everything. Peter knew, I got to get you out of your head. I got to get you to do some stuff where you're not afraid to fuck up. You're not afraid to screw it, you know, so that you can actually get that thing, you know?
This is a very new realization for me, like 4 or 5 months. A lot of times we do this thing where we're trying to make something sound like something else. You're like, well, I want this to have, you know, you pick a record and you're like, I want it to sound like this thing. And to get something to sound like something, there's probably only 1 or 2 ways to get there. But if you say, I want something to feel like something else, you then allow the person doing it freedom to get there in their own way. So when Peter was like, I'm not gonna whisper, okay, for this bar, I want you to be Bernard Purdy. And for this one, I want you to have Stuart Copeland hi-hats. He was like, no, I want you to play something that feels like this thing that I do. And there's like, I can't believe I've been making music for this long that I was disconnected from that idea. It's such a beautiful idea. It's like if I say, if I think about Sweet Leaf, the Black Sabbath song, in my head, it's the heaviest shit ever.
Right.
But if I go back and listen to it, it's actually not really that heavy in today's terms. But if I don't reference the actual recording and I'm like, I want something to make me feel like that thing, then I'm not in a cage from this recording. I'm not in a cage from any of the sounds or any of the technique that got it there. It's like I'm trying to make something feel like this thing makes me feel. And that, I think, helps us hold on to the I don't give a fuckerator, because you're not constrained by all this other stuff. Like it sounds, I don't know, it sounds like, I don't know, hippie, whatever, super heady. But I think that following things and searching for a feeling as opposed to a sound is a really valuable, just a really precious, childlike way to approach.
Yeah,
your art.
You know what that is doing essentially is it's putting back the subjectivity into the music and taking out the empiricism.
Yes,
which that's the beauty of music, is its subjectivity.
Yeah,
and the 1,000 roads to get to one spot.
Right.
You know, and who's to say if it's right or wrong? It's like,
exactly.
You know,
but if you're like, well, that doesn't sound like Sweet Leaf. Okay, that's one thing. But like, does it feel like Sweet Leaf? Do you get that feeling? So I love the idea of Peter dancing and him like, hey man, you know what the music is? I want you to play something that matches this art that is completely separate from you playing drums.
Yeah, or somebody saying, man, I want you guys to play, and I want people to think back to their first love.
Right.
When you play this. You know, we don't want people to party.
Right.
We don't people want to fuck.
Right.
I want you to think back to the nostalgia of your first love.
Right.
You're going to play that instrument different.
For sure.
You know?
I love the idea of, I remember having a 4-track and I was really into Sly and the Family Stones. There's a riot going on. And there's actually some parts on a bunch of Sly records from that record for like Fresh, where I was convinced that these people playing could not hear the parts that were played from the person before them. So it was just like, hey man, here's the form. I'm gonna put the drums down, and here's the form. Like this, you know, this isn't, you know.
And they weren't playing to the drums.
And then you put it all together, and it's just this like beautiful mishmash of like of stuff. And I love the idea of creating that way, where you go, hey guys, imagine telling 5 musicians, all right, this is the chart. I need you to play this chart like the first time you fell in love. You can't hear the lyrics. You can't hear anything. I want your interpretation of how you felt the first time you fell in love. And then you unmute all those tracks and put it together. It could be a hot fucking mess, or it could be something that's super exciting to me.
Or man, maybe 80% of it is a hot mess, and then you find this 20% that's diamond, and then build the rest of it back up. But all of a sudden you've got this furniture that's just so authentic as the core of it.
Yeah.
You know, you just never know.
That's beautiful. That's really exciting to me.
That's cool. So I remember you and I on one of our phone calls, which for those of you out there listening, I occasionally call David out of the blue just because I feel like every time we talk, I get a new nugget to roll with for the next few months. But you told me about that. And I tried it that night. I was working on a track.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, I think even on the phone, we talked about that, Missing You, John Waite.
Yes.
And man, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. You know, because how many times do you think, I mean, going back to your Black Sabbath reference, how many times do you think, man, the snare on that was so fucking huge? And then you go back and listen, and you're like, it's not really.
No, it's not that
But it
huge.
made me feel like it was somehow. They somehow used some variables to make me feel like it was in an arena.
Yeah.
And I just kind of pull up a snare and put fucking Valhalla on like 6 seconds. And I'm like, there it is. And then you go back to record and you're like, it's not really that loud.
That big. Yeah.
It's not that big. It's not that loud, but the snare is what got me.
Yeah.
Or, man, I remember that vocal just being so epic and beautiful and washy. And then you go, listen, there's not that much reverb on it.
Yeah.
Why did I think that? Why did I think it was like this swimming, just beautiful dancing vocal?
That's how it made me feel.
How it made me feel.
That's beautiful. And I want to be a part of that and to indulge that in myself and the people that I create with. That's exciting, because the other stuff, man, you start a session and somebody's like, well, what's number one this week? You know, you go through this thing and you're like, man, you
kill me.
You are narrowing the path that we can walk down.
Yeah. You know what's crazy, David, is how many times have you seen this? A&R, no offense to A&R, we all work for them, we love them, they're all our friends, have drinks with them tonight. A&R will be, the Adele record goes big. Mm-hmm. And so everything from there on out has to be like the Adele record. Everything they want to sign has to be like this. Everything, because something had success. Invariably, the records that are the big ones, they don't sound like anything.
Don't sound like anything. Right.
But yet we're signing iterations of the same thing over and over and over. You know, you got just okay, it's time in Hollywood for volcano movies, and we do 6 volcano movies, and then all of a sudden Pulp Fiction comes out. And he's like, I don't know why the fuck you guys are making volcano movies, you know? And I feel like that's our business, and it seems so obvious. We only want to sign things in here, but invariably the records that hit big are out here.
Sure.
So why are we not looking? I guess people have bosses and we don't want to get fired, and we don't want to get fired.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you why. Because the people that are in charge, for the most part, or in a large part, of promoting and marketing records have a system. And if it doesn't conform to that thing, because like when you say, I think about the Adele record, just Adele in general being a huge artist. Who are they signing that's like Adele light? Mm-hmm. Who are they signing that's like, you know, I mean, I remember after Sam Smith's record came out, I was like, well, man, maybe they'll have some like great emotional, like who are they signing that are like those things? Those aren't the things that get copycatted.
No.
It's some other thing. And it's like, well, the thing that was amazing was the thing that was, they don't even realize that the thing that was amazing was the fact that it was unlike anything else. The stuff that they copycat is the stuff that doesn't move the needle.
Adele, exactly. She will never have to compete with Dua Lipa because she has established herself so markedly different, categorically. Dua Lipa's got, I mean, I love Dua Lipa. It's a great pop song, but she's got about 70 Dua Lipas out there that are essentially singing the same song.
Right.
And they're signing 70 more.
And it actually forces Dua to like change her thing, because I felt like she kind of got there first and in a way that seemed really authentic to what her vision was. I don't think she was like, well, how can I make myself like whatever? But now the lane that she made for herself, she can't even inhabit, because then it's like she's like a reductive version of herself. Right. So now she's got to move on to some other.
You're right. When she first came on the scene, I was like, she is fresh. That's cool. But now everything's a derivative of that. Coldplay got killed by the same disease. They come on. Yeah, they're a derivative of Travis, but they're pretty fresh. Yeah. And it's good. And then all of a sudden they become so successful. Everybody's signing every band that sounds like Coldplay. Or the bands are making music to sound like Coldplay.
Yeah, for sure. Or, you know, I remember thinking with the Coldplay record that it was very derivative or reminiscent of, was it The Man Who? Was that the Travis record?
Yeah.
And then they did another record, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not exactly that. They had a lot of the same ingredients. And I remember the same thing with Stone Temple Pilots. They were like, oh, they sound just like Pearl Jam. And you listen to Stone Temple Pilots, you're like, they don't sound like Pearl Jam at all. They just needed to, it was because we didn't have enough points of reference to see all the other things that they were.
Right.
I remember because we're in the States, Coldplay was like, oh, they're kind of like Radiohead, but not as good. It's only because we only had that point of reference.
Right.
It's like, it's either Travis or Radiohead. And it's like, well, there are elements, they pick fruit from those trees, but there are other elements as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that Coldplay, kept moving down the track, because I just love that band, and they're, the fact that they're still a band and they're audacious. And I can't remember, Coloratura? Is that the song on the record that's like 10 minutes long?
Yep.
I'm like, man, I fucking love that.
Yeah. I feel like they're taking risks now.
Yeah.
That they didn't earlier in their career. Yeah. Man, absolutely huge. Hey, folks, one more shout out to our sponsor for the podcast, Love Justice International. Love Justice started 20 years ago when 6 college students decided that they would go to Kathmandu, Nepal, play soccer in the streets, get to know the kids of the city. And in the course of doing this, they really fell in love with Nepal, but also became aware of the scourge that really inflicts not just Nepal, but the surrounding region, and that is human trafficking. So as a result of seeing this, they tried to figure out what they could do, and started the organization originally called Tiny Hands, and now renamed as Love Justice International. One of the other reasons why this is very near to my heart and why I'm so closely connected to it is one of those 6 college students was my little brother. And as a result, I really got to watch them over the years and how passionate and devoted they are to this cause. But not just that, but how effectively and efficiently they administer the aid and the help towards eradicating slavery in the area. So I can't emphasize this enough. Go to the website, lovejustice.ngo. For just a few bucks a month, you can prevent a child from being trafficked or enslaved. It's that easy. So lovejustice.ngo. That's lovejustice.ngo. Thank you. So I'd be remiss to not get into this with you a little bit, especially for those who are listening. So you start touring with Mayer in 2002?
Somewhere in that, 2002, 2003.
So when you're on the road and you have a unique position with him, just because 1, you've been with him so long, 2, he's been so massive, and 3, you're a good dude, so you invariably develop relationships in an amazing way with whoever you choose to live life with. So with a guy like John, obviously when you're touring with someone, you're supporting them musically on stage. But with a guy like that, how do you end up supporting him outside of that? Was there, just in terms of, what people don't understand is when you're touring, you're living life. I mean, you're living life together. Do you feel like when artists get big like John was, that he needs you, obviously play guitar parts, but he also needs you to be David Ryan Harris, the man?
We talk about being emotional twins, he and I. I think musically we, definitely pick fruit from the same tree. But at this point, it's nice to know, like, we've been friends for longer than some artists that are on the charts now have been alive. So there's a level of like, he can do his thing and know I'm there. I got his back. And maybe it's not even maybe it's not a musical thing. It's just like, this person knows me in a way that I know he has no agenda. Like, I'm not all up in John's shit. Like, when are we partying, or what's going on in your house, or like, we don't relate on that level. I remember talking to John about his phone getting shut off, his Sprint bill got, like, we relate on a completely different level. And sometimes when you're a band leader, I definitely don't have as much experience in that position as he has. But sometimes you're like, well, I just want the assassin player for each individual instrument that's involved in this thing. And you put those people together and you're like, why doesn't it feel the way I want it to feel, or sound the way that I want it to sound? It's because the emotional connection between those people doesn't work. It doesn't matter what their technical ability is. And so I think for me, for John, I realized, and maybe to some degree he does as well, like Isaiah Sharkey that plays guitar on the gig, he can play better than me and John put together. It's not about what I bring to the table necessarily musically. Like, my thing is, like, I see the big pieces the big musical pieces, and I go, it's a real sort of Zen exercise for me. It's like, okay, well, he's doing that thing and this other guy's doing this other thing. So what's not there? And I think that transfers to just how we relate on an emotional and friendship level on the road. I'm not trying to be, when Dave Chappelle comes by and he's backstage, I'm not trying to be all up in the dressing room. Not because it's not like you can't come in the dressing room, but like that's not my thing. So I'm there. I liken it to helping my friend move. He's got this thing that he wants to do. He needs somebody to help him move and make sure, you know, the semi doesn't run into the building, and also that the person that's signing for it at the door, you know, I'm there, and you know, some of it's musical and some of it's just like personality and emotional support for one another. And it's a, you know, really special relationship. I don't have that kind of relationship with anybody else.
And did you and John know each other prior to him asking you to tour with him?
Mm-hmm. He, legend has it, I put out this record on Columbia, a solo record on Columbia in '97 that sold about 6,000 copies. And John bought copy 5,990. And so when he was at Berkeley, he'd heard this record. And so when he moved from Berkeley to Atlanta, he was like, oh, I got to meet that dude. And so it was between, he hadn't gotten a deal yet, and I was sort of between projects and between things. And that was, you know, so we just met in that sort of space. Like, oh, I love this record that this guy did, you know, in a time where there was no social media. It was just, you know, mixtapes and whatever. And we just became friends in that thing. And I was still, you know, kind of figuring out who I was and just starting to do like solo acoustic shows, which I hadn't really, I didn't start on acoustic guitar, I started on electric. And so, yeah, we were just friends in that space. And there were a couple super supportive bars and scenes at that time in Atlanta, and we just were a part of the same scene. And then, you know, he went off, he got signed and did the first record, and I did that Brand New Immortals record, which was a heavier record, and moved to LA, and his thing had started like sort of taking off. And he really was like, hey man, if you ever want to come out, just hang out and play guitar or sing or whatever, there's always a spot for you on the bus. There's always a bunk for you. And so I went out to do that just to see what it felt like. And I opened shows as well. And then it just sort of continued from there.
You being a 9 on the Enneagram, all those things you're talking about, well, not just you being a 9, but you being who you are. All those things you're talking about, filling space and accommodation and kind of mirroring someone, all things a 9 does really well. Obviously, all things you do really well. So along with that, maybe the 9 thing, have you ever thought about, I mean, one of the best touring gigs ever. Obviously, you've had amazing experiences with John and such a big part of your life. That said, when you tour and you're an artist, you sacrifice some stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you ever think, I wouldn't even put it in the category of regrets, because to me, I feel like your life, David, epitomized. I always like to use the metaphor of a river in terms of getting somewhere, the journey.
Right.
It's never about just jumping across a river. They're just all these stones. You here, and they all come from different angles.
Yeah.
And one even might be wrong, but once you hit it, you can kind of see something you couldn't see from the other one. So it was wrong, but it was right. Sure. So that's how I see life. I don't see regrets. I don't see wrong steps like that. It's such a part of the process. That said, do you ever think, like, what would my life have been as an artist without that tour? Did you have to make sacrifices for David Ryan Harris, the artist, to do that?
I mean, I made sacrifices for David Ryan Harris, the person who was trying to like make sure my kids could eat. And I never had a desire to be a star. I just wanted to, like, I love music. I'm as much a fan of music and records and the process and geeking out on gear and sound. Like, I'm as much that as I am a person that is in the business doing it. So there are parts of it, I've been fortunate enough to see how those things affect who John Mayer is, small J, small M. Mm-hmm. that I don't know that I'm strong enough or just that I have the stomach to deal with. And I feel incredibly fortunate that, you know, my friend, my brother, someone that I love, like my blood, has allowed me in that space. And I think that actually really enriches our relationship because I don't have any of those. I'm not like, hey man, let me get up here and sing. You know, like when he, you know, opens up the floor and I get to sing the thing that I do before slow dancing in a burning room. I'm never like, you know, there's no part of me that's like, oh man, I wonder how I could tell people what my Instagram page is in this last verse of this thing. I don't have the stomach for it. I feel like, you know, everybody I think would like to be everybody that does music or any sort of art where you're an independent contractor, I would like for the work to come a little bit more sure and on a more regular basis. But in terms of what my level of fame is, I'm cool with it. I don't want people in my bushes. I don't want, you know, I don't want that part of it. So I'm really lucky to have been able to. I've been doing this for 35 odd years. Mm-hmm. I'm not a household name. The people that know. And I try to treat people with kindness and respect. And I just do my thing. Like when I'm finally gone, you know, where they do the in memoriam thing on the Grammys and they're like, here's whatever, and you know, no one knows him except for other musicians in the house. I'll be that dude, and I'm fine with it. It doesn't, right. You know, I'm sort of really settling into a part in my life where I'm like, my lack of being a household name or sort of financial success is not a direct correlation to my talent or gift or ability to do it. They're completely separate. Mm-hmm. Like I'm good at what I do. I don't need to be on TMZ to know that I'm good at what I do and that the thing that I do has affected, you know, it affects people's lives in a very profound way that's actually larger than me. So I feel in the same moment larger and smaller. And yeah, I mean, I now forgot what the question was because I had tequila, but.
Yeah, we both had tequila. That's tequila without food. That's
monkey shoulders.
Yes, exactly. To jump to a different track here. Speaking of David Ryan Harris, the artist, and once again, when I use artist for you, not artist proper, artist right. Broad. When you think about you know, some people get started in the music business and it's like, hey, we got signed, we're Metallica. We're Metallica for the rest of our lives, right? It's right. Just very simple. It's right. Very binary. Metallica was on, off. You have a path I kind of relate to. I think a lot of people relate to because it is that journey across the river. This stone to this stone to this stone.
This feels good.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel good. I want to go do this. Yeah.
It really is reflective of a journey,
right?
Which I think is more accurate kind of across the board. Yet, you know, you'll always have the Metallicas and the U2s. But with regard to David Ryan Harris, the artist, how do you see somebody who's starting off now, people that are getting in to do what we're doing, their challenges at the beginning, at the front edge of that river when they're looking across those stones, just with respect to the music business, mm-hmm. How do you think it's changed looking at it now, what the young David Ryan Harris today, who's starting off in 2021 at the beginning of that river?
I mean, I kind of get asked like, oh, what advice would you give a person that was just starting out? And, you know, I've given slightly different answers to the same question. It's such a different vessel to get you across the river than it was when I started. And the thing that has served me more than anything has nothing to do with ability or taking advantage of situations. It's like I try to be a good listener and a person that people want to be around, first and foremost. In terms of like how and where you steer your ship, man, such a weird question because I feel like there's part of me, about 4 years ago, I'll try to get to a good answer to this question. About 4 years ago, I was like, I'm not going to stress anymore about money. My New Year's resolution is to not stress about money, because no matter what happens, when I'm completely stressed out and I think like, this is it for me, I'm gonna have to pull the plug, I get a call from someone. They're like, hey, could you come and do this thing? I was like, that's what happens every time. Not because I'm special, but because I have a gift to do this thing. And whatever creator there is that exists is like, hey, I gotta put some more gas in this tank. And so I'm like, I'm not gonna stress about it anymore. I will occasionally check in with my higher power and say, hey, listen, I know I haven't asked you about it in a while, but just so you know, I need some work, but I'm not gonna stress about it. So in theory, that allows me to just do the thing that I feel is next best for me without trying to look all the way down to where this piece of land meets the other piece of land. I'm just going to flow on this thing. And the next person that I meet, I'm going to treat them like a human being, and I'm going to treat them with respect. And if there's some piece of art that they have that they want me involved with, I'm going to treat it like it's my own. And so I'm only looking 3 feet in front of me. And that's worked, quote unquote worked. That's worked for me. I think there's so much about it that you don't have control over. So I think, man, just the idea of treating people in situations in a way that if you have to look back on them, there aren't regrets. And I don't mean in terms of like, that wasn't successful for me, but more like I treated the people that were involved in that thing in a beautiful way, or the way that I wanted to be treated. Looking back on my career, like that's all I can say. Like I meet people, one of my really good friends she's in a great position at a major label, and we kind of crossed paths a few jobs ago for her. And I remember her saying, oh, I remember the first time I met you at Mercury Lounge. And there was a part of me that was like, oh shit, what's she about to say? And she was like, you were so nice. Like you listened to me in my whatever, you listened to my conversation about how your song meant something to me. And that impacted how she treats me. Like there's all these other intangibles. Like you can look on YouTube and be like, well, this is how you have to like, this is how you have to set up your profile, and this is how many times you need to make sure that you update your posts or whatever. But no one ever talks about just don't be an asshole and follow your heart the best way that you could. I know it sounds super frou-frou, and it's like, well, of course, everybody knows the thing that you're saying, David. Like, I need the inside track. There is no inside track. Just don't be an asshole. If there's a gift that you have, I feel like the gift will provide. And I'm kind of only speaking to people that have that in their heart. People that want to be stars, I don't know what that is. Sure. I don't know what that is, because that's not my reality. That's not my world. So I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but
yeah, well, if you're a good person and you don't look more than 3 feet ahead, if it doesn't happen for you, if you don't get the result you want, then it still was right, because you were the person all the way along that you needed to be. Yeah. And you were doing the music for the right reason.
And you can look back and go, oh, I have a long list of people that will do my bidding for me, because they know, like, I haven't had to like cash in any favors, but I have a bunch of people that I've come in contact with, that I've done work with through my career. They will be like, oh no, like that dude is a straight up dude. You should give him this, whatever. If I had to write a resume or like get references, like I've conducted myself in a way that is, I'm humbled by what I get to do for a living. Music, I've said it many times, music has saved my life. It's bigger than I am. In this period of time, the last couple years, I was actually planning on retiring from playing shows. And then the pandemic happened, and this tour that I had that was supposed to be my victory lap, I couldn't do that tour. So I toured for the first time about a month ago. And in the middle of the first show, I'm singing, and a couple notes come out of my mouth that are just beyond me. I'm not saying that because I think I'm a great singer. I don't sing the way that I sing in a show. I don't sing that way at home. There's never any part of my life. So if I went 18 months without accessing that thing. And so when it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, everybody doesn't have that thing. Mm-hmm. So I have to figure out how to honor that thing. And maybe it isn't touring, maybe it's, I don't know, or just figuring out a way to do it in a way that makes sense. But when you find that thing that propels you, because I feel like we all have that thing that we do that's special. If you're honoring that gift and are, I'm humbled by it. Mm-hmm. You know, if all goes well, I close my eyes at some point during the show, and then I open my eyes, and the show is over. And then I talk to somebody after the show, and they go, "Great show." And there's part of me that wants to be like, "I know, right?" Because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
So as much as you can stay in that space, no matter what it is you do, that's the path.
Man, I always think of, you and I probably have talked about this a bunch, but I always think of songs like that when we're writing songs. I always kind of just think they exist. They're just behind this curtain.
Be quiet long enough to...
Yeah, you're just finding them. You're being receptive enough to find them. And then the subsequent resultant humility that comes from that view.
Yeah.
They already existed. We're just being open enough to find them or receive them when they come from behind the curtain or peep out from behind the bush or whatever it is. You know, then it's of your no doing. It's not, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, we just were the vehicle.
I'm just happy to be a part of the thing.
Conduit.
It's such a beautiful feeling.
This guy that I've probably quoted a couple times already, but he's been talking to me about knowing what's that thing that you do that was just God-given, mm-hmm. that is your thing, that doesn't have to do with ability or acumen or all these things, but just is like who you are. And he says, when you can highlight what that is, the thing that you just do by none of your own doing, mm-hmm. you can take such confidence because it's not you.
Yeah.
And so then when you go into a meeting and you got to talk, well, if you're resting in that, the divine, essentially my highest value.
Yes.
DRH's highest value. What is his thing? It's actually of your own doing. And we rest all our assurances and all this stuff that is of our own. How did was that track good? Was that song good? Instead of like, no, rest it in my highest value.
Yeah.
He says that when you're resting in that thing, the thing that you felt when you sang that note.
Yeah.
There's ultimate humility and ultimate confidence.
I get chills thinking about it. Yes.
It's how can you have humility and confidence in the same time? Mm-hmm. That's how.
Yeah.
It's not of your own doing. It's by the grace of the divine, however he looks mm-hmm. or she looks.
Personally, I think it's a she. That may be another podcast.
If I had to put the over-under on yes or no, I'd be with you.
Yeah, man, that is a beautiful space that I was not really familiar with until kind of recently, man. You know, you're like, yeah, that was an amazing show. That was an amazing note. Because it wasn't me. I was just lucky enough to get out of the way. That's a skill. My skill was to get out of the way and let this thing move through me.
Yeah. And there's got to be a way to exist in life like that every day. It's not
no matter
right?
what you do.
No matter what you do.
For a living.
It's not me.
Yeah. Man, if everyone could live in that space. I think a lot of times about how we as songwriters and artists and people that create, we live in that space where you tell a story or you have to be in contact with some sort of emotional dialogue. Like a garbage man doesn't get to do that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that the garbage man needs to sing songs, but like he doesn't have a forum where he tells his story, where he gets to like rest in the thing because the singing actually isn't my gift. I realize my gift is communication.
Right.
I just communicate through singing. So whatever your gift is, like everybody's got some gift and it may not present it. Once you realize how that presents in the thing that you're doing, maybe the guy goes, oh, well, I am a garbage man, but that's not my gift is actually that I like. I want to make the world a beautiful, you know, whatever it is. Like to take the abstract and to give it relevance and a space in your life is really difficult for people that don't do what we do.
Right.
We get paid to like live in that space, and I feel incredibly fortunate to live in that space.
We tend to make our career or the conduit or the vehicle of our gift the point,
right?
As opposed to that's just a weapon. It's just a weapon we wield. But the source, the bigger fulcrum of all that is your destiny.
Yes.
And you're a communicator.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a singer. You're a guitar player. But the bigger calling,
it's a communication.
The divine, the highest value of DRH is you're a communicator. And I think that is not something that is just for us as musicians. The Garbage Man has the same source.
He sure does.
And he may be a communicator.
Yeah.
His calling may be the same as yours.
Yeah.
But his weapon
just manifests in a different, yeah, which is beautiful, man.
Yeah. Figuring out a way to increase the percentage of our daily doings that operate in that space.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part.
Yes.
You know, we stumble on it here and there, or speaking
little glimpses every now and again.
Glimpses, man, but just the power that could come and the true joy, fulfillment, impact with people that you come across with, if we could somehow just like eke that 1% of activity in that space to like fucking 12%. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Be so nice. Hey folks, thanks for listening. Once again, a big thank you to our sponsor for the podcast, Love Justice International. You can follow them on Instagram. It's at LoveJusticeINTL, or you can go to their website, lovejustice.ngo, and consider donating. Once again, that is lovejustice.ngo, lovejustice.ngo. Thank you. It's so good to hear you say that fair, because I think I spoke to you when you were talking about the farewell tour. Your last round, I think you maybe even did a show here at Never Never. Yeah. Which we kind of thought was part of the farewell tour. So it's good to hear that you're that's not going to happen. But what's next, man? Like because in my mind, I was sitting here thinking about our chat this morning, and I was thinking, it feels to me, I don't know if you feel like this, Dee, but like I feel like my life is not linear. Some people have the blessing of having a linear life, and I so envy them. Right. It's very seasonal. So it's very up and down in the sense that very hard, very focused, very crazy, and then it'll slow and I'll wander. I'll get inside my head.
Sure.
I'm old enough now to know when that happens, not to get freaked out.
Yeah, you just go through it.
I know it means I'm baking for that next thing.
Exactly.
So as I was thinking about you this morning, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm just applying a pattern in my life to David, but it feels like you are at a real cool spot for a new season.
I could not agree more. I feel like one of the things that's really excited me in a way that I haven't been in a really long time is there's this collective in LA called Scary Pockets. Ryan and Jack, they
love them.
You know, so we ended up doing. I was like, well, man, you guys do these cover songs of other songs. I was like, well, why not do cover songs and arrangements of my songs and see what that feels like? So we did I sent, I don't know, 10 songs or so to Ryan. I was like, pick the ones that you like, because they're all like my children. I can't pick my favorite, but you can pick your favorites. And so we did these arrangements of these songs. We played a show. And it was just a great way for me to get reinvigorated. Like, I think I played guitar on one song, but I just fronted a band, which was, you think about James Brown. You don't think of James Brown as he's not a musician necessarily. He's a band leader. George Clinton is a band leader. Right. Prince was both band leader and incredible part of the band, but like his band was tight. He knew, they turned on a dime because it was his dime, and he knew how to do that thing. So I was fortunate enough to be able to use my material and come up with these new arrangements. Well, Ryan came up with the arrangements for the most part, and it just made me really excited about that thing. And then I thought about my favorite, one of my favorite records of all time, and certainly my favorite record of Donny Hathaway's is Donny Hathaway Live, which were all songs and compositions that had existed prior, but in this space they reached their highest purpose. So I'm just excited about the idea of taking, in terms of the material that I have, which is not household name stuff. There are some songs that I've written that I love that no one ever cut and they never came out. So I feel like before I build a new house, I need to be sure that I've gotten all of the mileage out of some of the things that, not necessarily doing songs that everyone knows, but there's songs in my closet that no one knows about. And I feel like part of me wanting to retire is I just realized I've been a musical hoarder. And it's like, I just have so much stuff. And if you create something, particularly writing or doing music in this city, and you write something or you create something that you feel strongly about and nothing happens with it, it's a little bit of a defeat. And we're sort of conditioned to deal with what that feels like and what that looks like. But after, considerable number of years doing it, you're like, man, I look back on my career, it's like I've written 500 songs. I mean, 250 of them can go to hell. There might be another 50 that are good. And it's like, well, why am I doing this thing? Why am I trying to create stuff for a medium and an audience that I'm not sure exists? So long story is, I just got really excited about the strength of some of these songs and some of these compositions and the idea of presenting them in a way that is different and that uses the strengths of what I am as a band leader. So I'm going to do some of that, and I'm not freaked out about it. I'm just waiting. Fortunately for me, I don't have a label or I don't have people standing behind me going, hey, when are you doing the next thing? Right. Which forces you to say stuff when you don't really have anything to say. Of course. I know that right now I don't really have anything to say. And it used to freak me out, but as we touched on earlier, it doesn't freak me out. I'm just I'm baking. Yeah. And when the next thing comes out, when I'm done baking this thing, I'm not sure what sort of form it will take, but I will honor it knowing that my skill is communication. So it could be that it's not a record. Maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a fucking pot. I don't know what it is. But I know that I have a gift, and it's been really sort of an easy, spelled out path to honor, quote unquote, that gift by touring and doing that whole thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Or there's different ways to honor it than me being in a Dodge Durango in the middle of Iowa playing to 10 people, because I'm too good for that. I mean, I don't know if that's like bad to say on this podcast, but like I've been doing it I'm too long. I've been doing it for too long at too high a level. There's certain cities that I can go to and I know I'm going to sell out the thing, but like I don't need to be in Des Moines playing for 8 people. I'm not doing it. No. Absolutely. The minute you started doing that, I might buy a round trip ticket and come knock you up the head. Yeah. So, I think there will be new music, and even if it's, a matter of me cleaning out the closet and finding songs that I'm like, man, there's really something special in that, in that thing, and making sure that those things are out in the world. And then maybe, in terms of releasing or being a part of new music, I'll be quiet long enough to hear what that is and feel like there's something that I have to say, and I'll say it. I feel like you're one of the, you're my bud, so I don't just say this just to, fluff you up here, but I feel like you see the music business, you see what we do correctly, you see it in an accurate way. There aren't a lot of people who do. We tend to gravitate to the people who do, just because in our business it's more the norm that can be icky. Yeah. So many great people, but the business of making money from music is just sometimes icky. Yeah. Getting more icky.
sex is great, but the business of prostitution, taking sex and making money from it is kind of icky. You know? So how do you, what are the mediums as you move forward that somebody like you, with the wisdom that you've accrued and the experiences that you've had, the fact that you've extracted this wisdom in a good, healthy way over the course of your career. You haven't had a career like Metallica, binary on and off, but you had this journey that's allowed you to be very diverse, eclectic in your journey.
Yes.
What are the other mediums by which David Ryan Harris is going to be able to pass this wisdom off to other humans that are going on the journey? Obviously, your artist voice, but what else?
The beautiful thing about it being a non-traditional journey is the same thing that makes it terrifying, that it's a non-traditional journey. I don't think the thing that my skill set doesn't have a particular job title. Like if you take the test, you know, when you're a senior in high school, it's like, oh, you've scored high in this thing, and so I think you would be good in these things. I don't know what that job is.
Sure.
So the scary part and the work part of it is figuring out what that is, because I feel like just as it has been in other parts of my career, I have to blaze a trail. I have to find a path that doesn't necessarily exist. And I honestly don't know what that is. Like I would love to be a sounding board and a mentor and a real mirror to artists that have the legs to do what I just don't have the legs to do anymore. Not the appetite. I just don't have I have a family, and you know, I don't want to tour 200 days a year. I don't necessarily know that that's something that you need to do. But I remember when I was just coming up and starting to kind of be in the business, the people that I felt like were trying to give me advice, I was like, you don't know what like they were too corny. They may have had the knowledge, but they were too corny for me to want to take it from them. So I'm kind of in a sweet spot where it's like I have enough wisdom because of the years that I've been doing it, but I'm still connected enough to not be super corny. So I'm kind of in a sweet spot in terms of speaking to an artist. It's like I've been there, I've done it. So like whatever knowledge I've gleaned over the years, I've lived that life, and I just want to be support for people that that can speak to the world. I remember with the most recent sort of social justice movement in the shadow of George Floyd, and just that moment in time, feeling like I wanted there to be some 22-year-old that had the ear and the compassion and the vision and wisdom to speak to the world. Because you don't want to hear from John Legend. I love John Legend, but like the kids think John Legend's old. John Legend's a legacy art. I'm a legacy artist. It's not that my message doesn't matter, but the people, it is a function of youth to distrust those people that are older than you.
Right.
And I want to provide support for people that can speak to people that need to be spoken to. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm the person singing or whatever, but if I can like provide the emotional, artistic, creative support to whatever that next generation of things, and I feel like I'm still, to use the sort of river analogy, I'm still in the continuum of the water that's going down the thing, and I'm able to pay back the debt that I owe music and this gift by passing it on to the next thing.
It's got to be a struggle to know. I mean, it's a struggle for everybody, but you in this moment to know how formal to make it. You know, I mean, so much of your calling, like residing in that highest value spot for you, is going back to what you said way at the beginning. How do you make it in the music? Be a good person.
Yeah.
So much of what you are and how you engage in the music business is through relationships, through kind of more the ambiguity of the process, you know, of just like meeting and going here, then going there, then saying this, then so we always want to formalize things, right? We want to make them specific.
Right.
I got to go be a manager. I got to go be.
It's like you can say all of that shit, but what do we put on the bottom of your business card? It's like,
Yep.
It's like, like what, when you're on the evening news, what is it? He says, David Ryan Harris, what do we put under that?
Right. we have to do it.
Right.
It's just like an itch. We just are, the inertia just throws us at, and the gravitational pull just throws us at how do we impurify and quantify you?
Mm-hmm. At the same time, I mean, this is like a whole huge bag of worms. Is that the phrase?
Thought you were going to say something else. So I'm glad you didn't. When you said it's
a bag of those. It's a bag of those too. We know that we are bigger than the thing that goes underneath our name, but we don't want to allow other people the space to be bigger than that thing underneath their name.
Wait, say that again.
So like, if I'm like if there weren't like a Grammy in memoriam thing, it was just like a general in life memoriam, it would go David Ryan Harris, I guess musician. But that's just a pretty small part of, it was like, so-and-so underneath their name is like teacher. It's like, there's so much bigger than the thing that you put under your name. And we know that we are that, but we don't allow other people the space to be, you're like, Coldplay, you're a Travis Woodby band.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much more than that. And it's just funny that we know that we function on a level higher than that, whatever that tagline is, but we don't want to afford other people the space.
For instance, yours should obviously say, should not be limited to just David Ryan Harris musician. It should say David Ryan Harris musician, strong wrists, high tolerance for pain. Why should we preclude those things from being fun?
Yeah.
Come on, man. You're more than just a musician.
Or if it just said David Ryan Harris communicator, you're like, well, I don't know how he did that. How does that's such an abstract thing. Sure. What does that even mean?
Sure.
And you got to dig deeper to find out what the rest of it is.
But it should tell us something. Those are the people that really, I mean, when people say, I'm a consultant.
Yes.
And I'm going to charge you $50,000 an hour for what I say. Well, why?
Consulting.
Because I'm consulting.
I'm a consultant.
It is.
Yes.
Don't put me in a box.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if it hopefully it doesn't offend you, I'm going to leave the thing about my wrists off of the.
Hey, we all have a high tolerance for pain at this point in our journey. I remember you and I talking in the middle of the pandemic, quarantine, before I even started the podcast, which I think it was a product of me sitting in my house too long. And I was like, man, I got to get on and talk to some folks. And I think you and I talked, and you were talking about a TV show. I was talking about the podcast. And not to get too broad here, but what the hell is going on in the world? And give me some DRH wisdom about how we make art in the middle of a messed up, upside down world right now, where it feels like nobody has their feet on the ground. We all hate each other.
Yeah.
I mean, is it I'm not so naive to just lean on the music brings us all together. Well, I don't know about that right now. I mean, where are you at in all this after the last year and a half? I know it's a big question, but I know it's the reason why I ask it, because I know it's big to you. I know you think about that stuff, especially when we talked, when you bring up the race thing, which has been such a, I don't know, integral piece of what's happened in the last, injected in the middle of the pandemic. That race thing has changed a lot of stuff around the world for how we are existing right now.
Right.
You know?
Well, even sort of distilling that to the seed of it all, I think when we were talking about the TV show thing, I was then and still am now really heavy on the idea of putting things into context. I guess I have to put that into context because the people listening to this podcast weren't on the phone call with us.
Yeah.
But just the idea that when you're able to tell your story, people are able to put your life and your existence into some sort of context. Like I it was a guy I went to. I'm going to tell you the story. You've already heard. Yeah. I'm going to tell the people the story. Basically, I went to school with a guy who had a rebel flag in the back of his truck window, and we were kind of buzzed, but I didn't know what kind of truck I didn't know, sort of vehicle he drove. And then when I saw he had this thing in the back of his truck, I was like, "Yo, hey man, what's up with the flag?" And he was like, "Oh, no. That flag doesn't mean that to me. Like, that reminds me of my papa, and he taught me how to fish, and like he loved Leonard Skinner. That was his favorite band, and like he was, loomed large in my life and taught me about being a man. So when I see that flag, it just reminds me of my papa." Mm-hmm. But I also understand that I have those memories and that connection to him with or without that flag. And it never occurred to me that you seeing that flag makes me make you think of me in a different light. So he was able to put my view of the flag into a particular context, and I was able to put that flag in his life in a context. So there's no amount of picketing, there's no amount of jumping up and down that could bring that amount of understanding in that moment. It was the only thing that made that moment beautiful was context. Mm-hmm. And most people don't get a chance to tell their life story or listen to another person's life story to put things into context. Like there's just no amount of marches. You have to break things down to the smallest nugget so that you can put another person's existence and their story into some sort of context. So to the degree that, number one, you can stand next to a person at a concert that maybe doesn't believe the same things that you believe, but you love this band. And so you can look at them and go, you know what? You might be all right because we both love whatever. Same with sports.
Sports are the best example. Yeah.
Now, how you're able to be actively and intentional in bringing about that sort of dialogue and putting life into context, I'm not exactly sure. Mm-hmm. But I know if we go back to that band Follow for Now that I was in, we're like 5 black kids from Atlanta, Georgia, playing in a bar in Huntsville, Alabama in 1984. And we show up. It wasn't just Huntsville, it was like Ruston, Louisiana, like wherever. We were just in a whole lot of places we had no business being. And you show up in the afternoon and people are like, "Yo, man, what y'all doing here?" You're like, "Well, we play music." "What kind of music y'all play?" "We play rock." And they kind of like, "Y'all play rock?" Like, "Yeah." End of the night, after we fucking rocked their faces off and they've been stage diving and mosh pitting and having a great time, they look at you and they're like, "God damn, y'all, we ain't that far apart."
Yep.
And there was no amount of me like trying to shove some sort of agenda. It was just like, I'm going to do the thing that I do. I'm going to treat you like a human being. And for tonight, I'm going to put something in a different sort of context. How you're able to like extrapolate that to other, a song or in the context of a record or whatever, I'm not exactly sure. But I know that that's a way that I've seen it work.
Yeah. Man, I'm with you. In fact, so much so, I get frustrated with seeing the phrase "end racism" on football fields and on, basketball courts. Mm-hmm. I want racism to be gone, but I feel like the only way it goes away is personal interaction.
Sure.
Is 1-to-1, 2-to-2, 1-to-10. I mean, you doing a show. Mm-hmm. I relate it to what I saw of Christians growing up, how they attempted to, in the evangelical movement in the 80s and the 90s, how they attempted to legislate morality. Mm-hmm. With good intent.
Right.
But you can't legislate the heart.
100%.
You can't do it. So as much as I want to put that on the back of a helmet and paste it up here in the bar and just people don't look at that and then change their view.
Right.
And so, which is a difficult thing to come to because it's grassroots. It's essentially person to person.
Right.
It feels slower.
Right.
And I think that's what Christians made the mistake of doing in the 80s and 90s is we want to speed it up.
Sure.
We want to force you to think like this in your heart, to hold these morals, to we think they're right, so you need to hold them. And I think that's the thing that we're up against with something like this that we're going through is how much can you shove it down people's throats, or how much does it really just pragmatically, just not even, I mean, I think most everyone wants it to be gone, but just pragmatically, how much does it help or hurt when we're doing that? And unfortunately, I think that's how it changes.
Yeah, it's slow.
It's slow.
It's slow.
It's slow, but for almost anything to be real, it needs to be slow.
And it's got to be it's like you said, it's got to be a one-to-one thing. And the other thing I'm excited about the idea of teaching people how to tell their story, no matter what it is that they do for a living. Yeah. The other component to that, if you tell the story, people have to learn how to listen. We were talking about you before you came in and saying that you just sort of happened into being a good host of a podcast. And I know that the reason that that's true is you're a great listener. And, like listening is not a passive skill. Listening is actually active. And so if we could just do a little bit more of teaching people how to listen, not be narcissistic. Like there's no fucking campaign for the person next to you to ruin your life by cutting you off to get it, like to make a left. Like they're not thinking about you.
Yeah.
Like, and we get so caught up in like these feeling like there's some systematic campaign against our life. And this is outside of a race context. Sure. But everybody's got their own struggle. And if you can learn how to listen or to give the benefit of the doubt that like, man, maybe this person's going through something that I don't know about. So that in tandem with like learning how to tell your story. Like my mom never got to tell her story. Like she never got to tell her story. Like most people die and they like never told anybody like, well, I grew up this way and this thing affected me in this way. And then when I got my heart, like, no, people don't get the chance to do that because you feel like writing songs or poetry is like, somehow some art form that you don't have access to or you can't do. Like it doesn't have to be Pulitzer Prize stuff. But when you write it down or you tell a person, you free yourself, and I just feel like you putting it out into the universe is it's freeing and it's grounding and it makes you have a connection to humanity. And I feel just talking about us being communicators, I feel really fortunate that I traffic in that for a living. Mm-hmm. So I have my trigger finger for it is really itchy, and I just love to live in that. But most people don't ever get it, and I just think that's the way to. For me, that's the way that I've seen. I've seen that move the needle.
Yep. I think you're right. It is encouraging that people want to be seen. They want to be seen, and they want to be heard. They want to be touched, and I think that's where that happens. I'm so glad you brought up your mom, because I've got a kind of a running tally of questions in my head, and it's the one question that I never got to ask you. Your mom, massively influential in your life, just in the few times we've spoken about her, and just hearing you talk about her in the couple shows you were gracious enough to do for us here at Never Never. She's a big part of your life.
Yeah.
And she passed recently.
Yes.
In the middle of all this. Just because we're talking about that period right now, what was it? Did you get to talk to your mom about when all this stuff was happening? Like, what was her?
We didn't really speak a lot about. You're talking about the social justice component, or
the middle of all of it, or no?
Not really. I mean, about 2 years ago, I was like, oh, it'd be great if I could just interview my mom. First, I don't even know where I got the idea, but just the idea of like having like great grandchildren be able to see a, 1080p version of their great grandmother talking about their life, and knowing that she had lived enough life where she wasn't, she didn't feel the need to like hide her missteps, because I think parents, you kind of want to hide your missteps. You're like, I didn't really smoke weed, or whatever. You just whatever. And she was like at a point in her life where she had adult children, and she could really tell me what the real was. So we sort of spoke about a lot of that, and how racism had affected her life, and about the life that she wanted for me and for my brother. And so we were sort of good at, like, we didn't need to touch on that anymore. But I'm a glass half full person. My mom got she wasn't healthy for a while. I feel just incredibly fortunate that I was able to see her. She was in the hospital. We ended up putting her on hospice. My kids could come and see her. Everybody, it was just like, hey, if you got something to say, if you want to say, like, come now, because she can see people. A lot of people lost their loved ones in hospital rooms where they couldn't be with the people that they loved. So it was such I feel so fortunate and grateful that we were able to, kind of spend that time. And like, that woman knew how I felt about her. There was no bridge uncrossed or stone left unturned. And the more distance I get on it, it's just over a year ago that she passed away. I think about, I was telling someone last night, my mother raised me in such a way that I would have people around me that when she was gone, they would make sure I was okay. Like, I think that's truly the job of a parent, because you know that you're not going to be there all the time. So it's like, I want you to be the kind of person that surrounds yourself with people that when I'm not here anymore, they'll make sure you're okay. So even in my relationship that have gotten a bit more, a bit more profound and a bit more grounded, and we like, lean into each other, like the relationship that I have with you, it's not because of me. It's because my mom raised me the kind of person to open myself up enough that we have a relationship where when she's not here, she's like, I raised him. He doesn't have shitty friends. I don't have shitty friends.
Wow.
And that's because of her. And so, like, the more time passes, I've like put these little things into perspective. And I'm sure that she didn't say when I was born, my whole job is to raise you, but in the way that in her actions, that's what happened. And that's really, it's beautiful. And, like, I don't want her to come back. I would like to be able to talk to her, but I don't, like, we're living in a shit show. I don't want her to come back. Sure. I just want to be able to call her when I want to call her. But yeah, other than that, like we were talking about, to kind of bring it full circle with our conversation, talking about the lives that people that love blues that they had, and the fact that they were trying to move past that and beyond that. And so you sort of sweep that life under the rug. I think, we didn't really talk a lot about race and racism. And my mom told me tons of stories about things that had happened to her when she was a little girl that she'd never discussed, because she was like, I'm paying this bill for you, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. You just live the life that I paid for. So we didn't really talk a lot about it, because I think in her mind, she was like, I did all that so you won't have to.
Interesting.
Which is beautiful, but also slightly dangerous, because you don't want to forget your history. But that was just the path that she took. There's some people that I grew up with, black friends of mine, that their parents were like, I don't ever want you to forget. I want you to live in this thing, and it burns for them in a different way than it burns for me. But, I know that I can see in her heart, in her mind, she's like, I've already done those things, so we don't have to talk about them. We don't, you you live your life. Because that's kind of the job of a parent. It's like, I'm not going to tell you that we're short on rent this month, buddy. You just play with them Legos. We got
right.
You know,
not
we got
telling them everything that's going on.
Yeah.
With it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That balance between shielding, exposure and shielding.
Yeah.
It's a little both, right?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
You want your kid to be exposed.
Yes.
But you want to shield.
Mm-hmm.
God. I'm so thankful I'm not a parent, but like, I can't even imagine. God, that's so hard. You might have already said it, but I was going to ask you, what's the one, and it sounds like there are countless, the one thing in DRH that you look at and say, man, my mom gave that to me, and I wield that, God, every day.
To treat people.
Yeah. I feel that.
And it's good to know that, like, I didn't have to make a conscious effort to do it or to not do it.
Yeah.
I just did it innately because she'd be like, you don't go to those people's house, drinking all their Kool-Aid or, whatever.
Yeah.
We do this thing, we call it Gentlemen's Supper Club. You've been at Supper Club. Yeah. And we do these, those of you that are listening that have made it this far, this thing called the School of Life. And they have these, I think it's located in Melbourne, Australia. And they have these cards, 100 cards of life. And there are these questions. And so we use them in our Gentlemen's Supper Club. We're like me and 4 or 5 dudes, of which, Jamie, you've been one on multiple occasions. We answer these questions and they go kind of deep. One of the questions came around and it was like, what do you wish that your parents had taught you that they didn't teach you? And mine is, I wish my mom had taught me the value of being loud, because I'm always fairly deferential. Don't go over those people's house acting a fool. Don't drink all their Kool-Aid. You stay longer than you're supposed to stay. Don't put your feet on, So I've been deferential to a fault, but my life has turned out well because I was also not loud to a fault. Allow people space to be who they are, and sometimes maybe too much space. But that was her. The one thing that she taught me was to. It wasn't even be deferential, but like you don't need to be the loudest. Yeah, right. Respect. Yep. Exactly.
Yep. Well, and sometimes maybe everybody doesn't have to have everything. Maybe in order to be so brilliantly deferential and kind, maybe you aren't the best at being loud. I mean, maybe that's part of it. And then somebody else is really good at being loud. They're never going to really be that deferential. Sure. But they're that piece. Maybe that's kind of, we make up pieces to a whole. Right. Yeah, that's really cool, man. I love how you talk about your mother. I've always been very impacted, aside from just the song that breaks me down every freaking time I hear it.
I don't cry anymore when I play it.
You don't?
Mm-mm. I used to cry every other time, or more than every other time. When I play it now, I don't cry. I told her I told her how I felt. And before it was like, I know one day you're going to go, and I don't know if I'm going to be ready for, that was the spirit that it was from. It's like, well, she's gone now. We already had the conversation. Yeah. So I tell it now, I sing it now, and I honor it. And it's beautiful to watch other people cry and have that emotional connection to it. And I'm like, there aren't very many songs. There was a Malcolm Gladwell thing where he was talking about, he's like, to make someone cry in a moment is really difficult to do. It's like, I could say something to you right now to make you laugh. It's like, I don't know what I could possibly say to you to make you cry. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I was able to, from my own experience and from my own love, create something that could bring people to that space, it's very humbling, man.
Man, I'm probably only going to say this because we've been drinking a lot of tequila, but I would say this if you and I were talking alone, so I'll say it on here. What the hell? I remember through the course of my life, one of the things that I hold on to as a bigger compliment than almost anything, it impacted me so much, and I revere these words is whether I was in 6th grade, whether I was in high school, whether I left the state and went to college, then came to Nashville, and all those chapters, people would say, when you play piano, I don't know why, I just cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I never knew why I held on to that so much. I loved it.
Right.
And then I thought back, man, when I started to play piano, I cried.
Yeah.
Like that's when I was sitting learning after taking classically, and I was kind of learning how to play from here, you know, and 13, 14 years old, I would just sit in the dark. I would just sit in the dark from, God bless my parents for not kicking with tiny little cinder block house. I'm playing piano from 11 till 2 in the morning, like 20 feet from their bedroom.
Right.
But I'm in the dark crying.
Yeah.
So there's something about that, man. That's like,
no one laugh, like you laugh if a situation is uncomfortable, or you laugh because other people are laughing. No one cries because other people are crying, or you know what I mean? Like, no one cries to like make a situation lighter. Like you only,
it's not a naturally superficial.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a bit of a loaded response.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, especially I guess for us as dudes in this culture, you know, it's a very powerful reaction.
Yeah.
But anyway, man. Well, D, I am so grateful that you came by to chat with me.
So glad that, you know,
it means a lot to me that you do it. I always love talking to you, and when we get the chance, and for us to do it as a part of this and let other people hear it is amazing. I've told you this, but I know a lot of, I shouldn't say this in public, but I know a lot of people, and I don't like a lot of people. And you're one of the most honest, heartfelt, authentic souls, which, you know, for me is a 4.
Right.
Authenticity, I can't escape it. It's just, I resonate with it. I value it. I'm attracted to it, and I bleed for it.
Yeah.
And you have this amazing ability to be authentic without trying, which I really appreciate. And I want you to touch as many people as you can in this world, which makes me happy that you're not doing a farewell tour.
Not yet.
And I count it a privilege to call you a friend, but to have you here today. And man, you're a humble cat, and you don't need to be, but you are. So thank you for coming by.
Well, man, you know, you're supposed to, well, hopefully the compliments don't go one way. Or well, you complimented me at the beginning, so I'll compliment you at the end before we sign up. I just think that the highest praise I can give to someone now is to say that they are a soulful person. And anybody talks to me about you, I'm like, he's just the way that you feel and the way that you're what we talked about earlier. You're a great listener. There's nothing. I was talking to somebody that I met at a show, and because I remembered something that she told me the first time I met her, suddenly she thought that I was like, I don't know what she thought, but I was like, I actually think it's sad that just because I listened to you, that's a big thing. Mm-hmm. But I guess it is a big thing, and you are a great listener, and nothing makes a person feel more just heard, listened, and valued than to have someone listen to them. And I always feel like you are a soulful person that gives you give the stage, and you know I know that you're keying in. We're eye to eye, and we're having a real conversation and a real connection, and that's special, man.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Folks, thanks for listening. Nashville Off the Record. We will see you again soon.